All right, welcome to Touchdown Talks. This is going to be my Super Bowl preview episode, just coming out one day before the Super Bowl. Before I go any further, please feel free to hit subscribe. Don't forget to hit the notification button as well so you don't miss any future content related to the NFL. Both during the season and the off season, I'll keep you covered. Of course, we're very soon going to be in that off season, so going to have content here on YouTube, on other platforms, to keep NFL entertainment going, at least to some extent, during the dry months of football. But without further ado, let's get into my preview and predictions for the Super Bowl. So before I break down exactly my predictions, just want to take a look at NFL Pro. Website you can get through having an NFL Plus subscription, but really great resource. Of course, there's other places that are free, ESPN, just NFL.com, other places that you can get plenty of stats, other things. But I think one of the values of NFL Plus is you have access to next gen stats, a lot of other little bit more new, advanced types of things to look into if you're wanting previews and help with predicting games. So first of all, you can see right off the top here, we have our live odds. These are pretty much what you'll see, or what I've been seeing pretty much all week. Chiefs favored 1.5. The over-under currently set at 48.5. This had been at 49.5 earlier on in the week, but it has in the last couple days moved down to 48.5. So, a little bit lower, but certainly, if you're wanting to bet the over, that only helps you. If you're wanting to bet the under, which I'm leaning towards, makes you a little less comfortable, but that does also mean that there's been some movement in the direction that I'm betting as well. So I'm not alone in betting the under for this game. So that's where it is. Chiefs favored 1.5, over under at 48.5. So, not the highest over under you'll get for an NFL game, but up there, pretty average to high average, I'd say. And certainly for a Super Bowl, Super Bowls can be kind of wacky. So, not always the easiest to predict exactly what the score is going to be. And then for the spread, 1.5, not a huge spread at all. So, pretty close to being a pick'em game here. I think this is, even though this is not necessarily the matchup that most fans around the country and even non-hardcore football fans, I know this isn't the matchup that most people wanted. These are two franchises that aren't necessarily beloved around the league. Of course, the Chiefs being the current dynasty, and the Eagles, kind of being a fan base that, rub people outside of Philadelphia and outside of Eagles fans. Sometimes rub people the wrong way, but, I'm excited about this matchup. And the thing is, again, even though you might not be excited about this matchup, I would say it's fair to expect this game could end up being a classic. So, don't get too upset. Don't be too worried. I think this is going to be an exciting game. So, again, I don't want to get your hopes up too high. You never know with the Super Bowl, but I think this could very well end up being and likely will be a one-possession game. That's what I'm predicting, and I think this will be really close. So, just to get into some of the stats of why I think that'll be the case, just right off the bat here. Obviously these are stats that just average throughout the whole season and the postseason, but average points per game, Chiefs averaging 22.6, Eagles 27.2, so higher there. And then if we also come over here to defensive stats, we can take a look at points allowed per game by each team's defense. So Eagles defense ranked second overall in the league, 17.5 points, although this is just for the regular season. If we look at regular season and postseason points per game, Eagles actually finished first at 17.9 points allowed per game. Chiefs finish fourth, or that's where they sit right now, 19.4 points allowed per game. So, really both teams, obviously, they've made it to the Super Bowl, so obviously they both have good point differentials for their average, and both pretty close to the top of the league. Both of them top 4 in defense, and then on offense, as you can see, a little bit closer to average, certainly for the Chiefs. Eagles still top 10 offense as far as scoring per game. As far as turnover differential, both teams top 10. The Eagles certainly have also produced more turnovers as a whole as a defense, but for the Chiefs, they've been pretty good at, one thing that I've come to learn over recent years, there's the popular adage that's been, probably around way longer than I've been alive, is that winning the turnover battle is key in football, and at least historically always has been. It's one of the best. It's been one of the best stats outside of points, of course, that tells you who's going to win the game, is the turnover margin. But as football has gone more offensive leaning and of that sense, turnovers may be a little less dependable, for your defense, things like that. Sometimes we have seen teams, including the Chiefs this year, we've seen some examples of times where teams can be losing the turnover margin and can still win the game. You can overcome losing the turnover differential. It's going to be tough, but it can be done. And one of the ways that can be done, as far as being lower on the turnover margin as a whole, one way you can overcome that and get wins is if you just aren't giving up that many turnovers, and it's just a pretty clean game as far as turnovers for either side. If it's a 0-0 turnover game, obviously turnovers aren't going to be an impact. And even if it's just maybe one turnover, say for example, there's one interception and it's some pick that Patrick Mahomes throws, or, a fumble that the Chiefs have, and that's the only turnover of the game. Sure, that turnover could end up being massive, but the Chiefs are a team that I believe could overcome a single turnover, something like that. So turnover margin these days, not as big of a deal as it used to be, but still certainly something to watch. Certainly with both these teams, they're good in the turnover margin. They're top 10. They're not going to turn over the ball a ton. These are two very good quarterbacks. But penalty-wise, of course, Chiefs, one of the least penalized teams in the league this season. Eagles, a little bit more penalized, but, closer to top 10. So these are both two teams that generally pretty disciplined. Now, of course, penalties often get attributed to the coach and the discipline of the team that comes from good coaching or bad coaching. So obviously I and most people definitely very much favor, as far as the coaching matchup here, definitely favor the Chiefs with Andy Reid. Also, coordinators they've got, at least with Steve Spagnuolo on the defense, and then with Andy Reid pretty much being over the offense. Of course, they do have Matt Nagy as the offensive coordinator, but Andy Reid really runs the offense for the Chiefs. And then for the Eagles, you do have Vic Fangio, one of the best defensive coordinators in the NFL for many years running. But then you got Nick Sirianni, who it is kind of hard to argue at this point. I mean, there have been a lot of skeptics of his coaching, including myself, but it's kind of hard to argue at this point. He's got a pretty good resume as far as winning percentage goes as a head coach, but part of the reason why the concerns with Nick Sirianni are valid is because even this season and this past offseason, the Eagles themselves, the owner, GM, they made signs that showed that they weren't super confident in Sirianni's abilities. Bringing in Vic Fangio, for example, and the coordinators, some of the coaches they have there right now, also Kellen Moore as the offensive coordinator. Nick Sirianni wasn't the one that chose his coordinators and some of the coaches they brought in this year. That was done more by ownership and by the GM, which isn't usually typical. A lot of times you let your head coach choose the coaches that are going to be under him, but this past offseason, they kind of took those duties away from Nick Sirianni, which was kind of a show that they weren't fully confident in his abilities as a head coach to be able to delegate to the right people. So that's part of where the skepticism comes from. He approaches things a little bit differently, not necessarily the best at the mic, sometimes a little bit emotional when it comes to interacting with fans and players and things like that. But in a way, I think players actually do like that and respect that. So, and again, he's winning a lot. But yeah, if you have to give the matchup coaching wise to either side, it's the Chiefs, which I think does attribute a little bit to why the Chiefs are fourth least penalized team in the league. Now, obviously, I hear you. The game's rigged. The NFL's rigged. I'm sorry. I don't know if you'd be surprised by me saying this at this point, but I don't really buy the NFL's rigged stuff. I'm sorry if you do. Please don't hate me if you can. If you can help it, don't hate me. I'm not a Chiefs fan. I'm a Bears fan. But personally, I don't buy the league is rigged for the Chiefs stuff. In my experience, 26 years of living and being a football fan, NFL fan for most of my life anyways, what I've seen, especially going from the Patriots dynasty to this Chiefs dynasty, is really we complain about refs whenever our team loses. Let's be honest. If the Eagles win this game, for example, I don't expect any complaining about the refs to be talked about at all. And the media, fans, I doubt that's even going to get mentioned. If anything, you might see meme accounts and stuff mentioning, oh, hey, this would have gotten a lot of traction if the Eagles had lost. But that's about all you're going to get. Maybe some Chiefs fans are going to complain about refs if they lose, of course. But, of course, if the Chiefs win, the narrative is automatically going to be whatever call was made or not made, there's going to be one of those calls that's going to become the magnet that everybody is going to hone in on, and that's going to be the sign that the league is rigging it for the Chiefs, which I just think it's kind of ludicrous. I'm sorry, but again, I get it. There's the Taylor Swift thing. They're the dynasty. I get why people are annoyed and tired of the Chiefs. I understand it, but I don't think there's enough fair actual evidence. Sure, there's dots that you can conspiracy theorists and you can create your own dots to connect them all you want, but I think there are reasonable explanations to point out why the Chiefs aren't as penalized as other teams, including good coaching, and just that they have good players on their team consistently and they're a well-run franchise. Again, both these teams are well-run, so I expect this is also a Super Bowl. Refs generally are pretty good, especially in the Super Bowl, at swallowing the whistle a good bit, not making any crazy calls, because they do. They're human. They want to, especially in the Super Bowl, they want to try to avoid being in the spotlight too much. But you got to understand, I've said this before, but one example I've heard from players and coaches I've been around in my life is that one thing with questioning penalties is that if you really wanted to, you could probably question every single play of every single game. If you really wanted to, there's probably a holding call or something that you could find somewhere that could have been called or maybe shouldn't have been called. Especially with something like holding, it's always very subjective, and it very much relies on whether or not a ref happens to be looking at the right moment and whether or not they determine in their own mind that it was egregious enough to call it. And again, sometimes with something like a holding, sometimes refs will see it and they will not call it because they don't want to become too much of a annoyance to the viewership product of the game if they don't feel like it was relevant enough to call it. So, just saying that happens at all levels of football. Referees do their best, but they're not perfect. And when the game's going at top speed, especially in the Super Bowl, can be tough. But again, I expect this game to be well officiated, of course. And officiating in the NFL, I'm not saying it's perfect, but I just don't buy the rigged stuff. I think the idea that it's rigged specifically just for the Chiefs, I think that's silly. Really, if the NFL wanted to rig things for a team, I don't think, and I get it. I get that there's the Taylor Swift element, but I don't think rigging the games for the Chiefs doesn't really matter. As far as getting the Taylor Swift views, all they have to do is show Taylor Swift, which they're going to do. That'll do it. They don't necessarily need to rig the game for the Chiefs to get in those views. If the league really wanted to rig games to get more views, they would do it for, if anything in this matchup, they'd rig it for Philadelphia, which is a bigger TV market than the Chiefs are. If leagues were trying to rig things, they would generally want to do it for the bigger markets. So for the NFL, that might be they'd want to rig it for, in this case, Philadelphia. In general, it would be more for, one of the New York teams, one of the LA teams, Chicago Bears. They'd want to rig it for them. But, a small market team in the Chiefs, one of the smallest markets for the NFL, which is very much a TV product. That's where most of the money comes from. Rigging the game for the Chiefs doesn't make sense financially. And again, even with the Taylor Swift element, I don't buy that that's enough for the league to get all 150 plus referees that they have agreed to rigging the game for the Chiefs. I just don't believe that. Going into some other key advantages that you'll hear for this game, Chiefs offense and Eagles defense. I think in both sides of this game, the trenches are going to be a huge part of it. The Eagles have a really good offense and defensive line. Chiefs have really good in both of those areas as well. You got Chris Jones on defensive line for the Chiefs, and then on the side of the Eagles, you've got guys like Jalen Carter. You've got some stars that really can have an impact and disrupt the game if they're able to get in. But both teams also do have some pretty good and experienced offensive lines as well. So really, obviously, one of the main key differences that you're going to hear talked about, of course, for the Eagles is their run game. First overall efficiency in the league. That's certainly, they need to get Saquon Barkley going. And I'm sure the Chiefs, that's probably going to be one of their first priorities, is stopping Saquon Barkley and forcing Jalen Hurts to play well against them, which, to be fair, 2 years ago in the Super Bowl, Jalen Hurts did play pretty well, and they still lost. It was actually one of the best games Jalen Hurts has ever had in his career, and they still lost. But at that time, they didn't have Saquon Barkley in the running game. So I think the Chiefs, it's going to be, they're going to need to place more emphasis on stopping the run. And if they can do that, if they can, slow down Saquon Barkley, even slow down some of the running from Jalen Hurts, that'll be where the Eagles could get into trouble if Jalen Hurts isn't able to get back up to that level of play that he did a couple years ago. And then on the side of the Chiefs, of course, and the other thing is for Jalen Hurts that could be a problem is this is Steve Spagnuolo's defense. They've got, they've really built that defense up this last couple years. It's been pretty good. And Spags gets a lot of credit for being one of the best blitzing defensive coordinators in the league, really good at mixing things up and getting pressure. And then on the other side, Chiefs offense, obviously, it's going to come down to what Mahomes can do. Does Travis Kelce show up? But it's not just the Travis Kelce show. I mean, they've got a running back by committee. They've got, Xavier Worthy, Hopkins that's in. They've got some weapons, some of the better weapons that they've had for Patrick Mahomes to use in a couple of years, really, since Tyreek Hill left. Some of the best weapons he's had, and both these teams, thankfully, coming into this game pretty healthy as well. So for the Chiefs offense and for the Eagles defense, it's going to come down to, are they going to be able to stop Jalen Carter? If he's getting into the backfield and disrupting Patrick Mahomes, that could be a problem. Now, Mahomes is pretty good under pressure, but, obviously if Jalen Carter causes some issues and gets a bunch of sacks, Mahomes isn't going to be able to overcome that necessarily, but I do think that the Chiefs' offensive line is going to be able to do pretty well against them. Another thing that's interesting to mention, I mentioned that Vic Fangio is the Eagles' defensive coordinator. A very good defensive coordinator, one of the best in the league. But interesting to note, record-wise, Vic Fangio as a defensive coordinator up against Patrick Mahomes in his career. I believe the stat was Patrick Mahomes it's either 7-0 or 8-0 against Vic Fangio's defenses. So, and that's across multiple different franchises that Vic Fangio has coached for over the last couple of years. So, not a good sign there for Vic Fangio and the Eagles defense. I'm sure obviously he's probably well aware that he's lost all those games to the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes. But yeah, so with all those things, there's plenty of other stats I could go into, but I've gone long enough. So I'm going to wrap this up by giving you my actual predictions here. So I do have the Kansas City Chiefs winning the Super Bowl. I've got this being a lower scoring game, so as far as the over-under at 48.5, I would still take the under personally. It's one that I have a feeling I'll be sweating out on. I think if it is under, it's going to be pretty close to that 48.5, but I do have it. My final scoring prediction will be 23-20 for the Chiefs, and with that win, I think the MVP for the Super Bowl ends up being Patrick Mahomes. Obviously, that wouldn't be much of a surprise. Could end up being Travis Kelce if he has a really monstrous game, maybe a couple touchdowns. Certainly, he could get it. Maybe Chris Jones if he's a huge disruptor on defense. He could get it as well. Maybe another Chief if they, cause some turnovers or something. That could happen. But certainly the most likely MVP if the Chiefs win would be Patrick Mahomes. So that's my prediction. I understand probably not the most exciting for some of you that don't want the Chiefs to win. I don't have my full bets decided on yet, but as far as some props that I like that I've been looking at, I do like Patrick Mahomes over on rushing attempts, over 5.5. I think for the Eagles, I like Dallas Goedert to get over 52.5 receiving yards. And then also for the Eagles, Saquon Barkley, I do think he's going to get over 99.5 rushing yards. That's not the actual line. That's an alternate line. But I think that the actual line that you'll see for Saquon Barkley is closer to 110. But I'm a little nervous about that. I think the Chiefs defense is very much going to focus on stopping Saquon Barkley. But even with that, I do still think he breaks that 100-yard mark. So those are a few prop bets I like so far. I will, closer to kickoff time, I'll probably be posting on YouTube and other platforms some of my actual bets that I've made closer to kickoff. But yeah, so those are some props and some bets that I like. But yeah, my final predictions for the Super Bowl, 23-20 for the Chiefs. Let me know down below in the comment section what your score prediction is. And I should also note, have it on the screen for you here as well right now. This was my Super Bowl predictions before the season. Obviously, I was wrong on the I was wrong on the Lions making it, and I had a very close score between the Chiefs and the Lions there. But hey, if the Chiefs win it, and they score within the 20s, I can say I was right on the Chiefs winning the Super Bowl before the season even started. So, and could be very accurate on the score as well. So with that, I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for watching, and I will see you after the Super Bowl.